College football is back, baby. So you know what that means. The Pigskin Cafe is back, and I got my good buddy Graham Haney here with me today to break down and preview the 2025 college football season. So sit back, relax, and let's get this thing started.
Welcome to the Pigskin Cafe, a podcast where Hampton, Chase, and Graham break down all things college football. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
They had to win this game.
There's a problem. This one's tough.
We are back.
That's what my gut's telling me.
I genuinely could not believe it.
You don't live in the great state of Texas.
All right, big boy. Hold my sweet tea.
What are we doing?
That is a stat there, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome back into the Pigskin Cafe. My name is Hampton Sipper, and I've got my good friend, as always, Graham Haney, joining me today to talk a little college football. We're going to be previewing the 2025 season for the whole country, but specifically Alabama and the SEC. Graham, happy to have you today, man. How have you been doing?
Been doing great, Hampton. Glad to be back with you and all of the listeners of the Pigskin Cafe. Feels like it's been a long time since we've been together, but I'm glad the season has started back. I think when it comes back to a new season, we have two ways it can go. It always starts out good, but will we be attending a funeral like we were last year and everybody's disappointed, everybody's sad? Or will we regain the championship mentality, the championship level of Alabama football? Hampton, I know you're excited. I am too. Without further ado, let's get this thing going.
I love it. Let's do it, my friend. But before we do, got two quick housekeeping items. If you're new to the channel, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, leave us a like on the video, leave us a comment. We love engaging with you. And last year, I felt like we had our best year ever. So go over to our social media, go to Instagram, go to Twitter, follow us there, hit the notification bell on YouTube, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, we are there for you guys to take you through the college football season. And then the other note is that usually we have a third compadre, Mr. Chase Haney, joining us, but he will not be a permanent host on the Pigskin Cafe this year because, to be completely honest, I canned him. He wasn't up to snuff. No, for real. Chase has a lot going on right now. He's an expecting father, and that's an exciting time for him. And so with that added responsibility, he thought it was best to kind of pull away a little bit from the show, but he won't be a stranger. He'll be on here at some point this year, and we look forward to all three being back together once again sometime in the future. So without further ado, and with that all out of the way, let's jump in. All right, we're going to start with a little preview of the Alabama Crimson Tide going in 2025, and we're going to start specifically on the offensive side of the ball. What I don't want to do, Graham, and if I get going too much into this, please stop me and let me know. I don't want to rehash 2024. We did that plenty last year. I think everybody that watches this show understands how I felt about the offense, how I felt specifically about the quarterback. But I do think there are a few points to look at from 2024 that we can kind of discuss as a segue into 2025. So I would say last year Alabama's offense was very inconsistent, very sporadic. You had the first half of the Georgia game, well, mainly the first quarter and a half of the Georgia game, where they looked like the best offense in the country. Jalen Milroe looked like a number one draft pick. Everything was rolling. But then you had a game like Tennessee where the passing game was anemic. Nothing was flowing in play calling there was no rhythm. There were turnovers. There was a lot of inefficiency. And I think it's important to note that the biggest change from last year to this year, as far as the coaching staff-wise, is Ryan Grubb coming back from Seattle to be the offensive coordinator this year, replacing Nick Sheridan. Nick Sheridan is still on staff as a quarterback coach, but I think Ryan Grubb coming back in an official capacity as the offensive coordinator, I think it's huge for this team because I do think there's a special chemistry that him and Kalen DeBoer have together as fellow coaches on the staff, and they have over There's a lot of trust there because they've worked together for 10 to 12 years. And I think it's very, very vital. I also think it's vital to know and to note that what Alabama fans saw last year in terms of offensive scheme, offensive philosophy, that was not the Kalen DeBoer offense. And I know there have been plenty of people, and one thing that has really frustrated me is a line that I've heard over and over and over again. Well, just Jalen Milroe was not a scheme fit for the Alabama offense. And I agree with that to an extent. He was not a scheme fit for that offense. But I would also contend they did not run their full offense last year. And we said that on the show at the time. We also noted, I believe it was week 2 or 3 of the season, where Kalen DeBoer said there's a lot of stuff that we run and that we would like to implement that we won't this year because we don't have the personnel to. I got told by many that was referring to the offensive line. It was referring to the receivers. It had nothing to do with the quarterback. Well, then last week, Ryan Grubb comes out and says, we're not running the Jalen Milroe offense this year. We're running our offense with an offense that is predicated on passing the ball downfield, and that is kind of what kickstarts this offense is the passing game. That is the primary focus. So for those who say that, Jalen Milroe just wasn't a scheme fit, I would just argue that Jalen Milroe, no matter which offensive coordinator he had, he was very hard to build around because there were a lot of limitations that you had to account for, which limited your playbook, which limited how many counters and how many multiples you could throw at defenses based on how they were playing you. You had it's like a pitcher that only had a fastball. I know I've used that analogy. You only had a fastball, but you don't have a curveball. You don't have a sinker or something to keep the batter kind of off balance. It's the same for an offense and defense. And I think that's really important to note. And I think by the end of the year last year, when it had gotten so bad in the Oklahoma game, in the Michigan game, many Alabama fans who had defended Jalen Milroe over and over and over again finally came to the realization of, yeah, he's just not getting the job done. And again, like I mentioned last year, it's not all on him. There were many factors that kind of contributed to that. But I think we can all say that his limitations significantly hindered Alabama last year. And the last note I'll say on that is, like the Joker in The Dark Knight, we weren't monsters. We were just ahead of the curve when it came to Jalen Milroe because we were on it from 2023 on to this past year. So now let's flip the page to 2025. Graham, I don't know about you, man, but I'm very excited about the possibilities of this offense and what they can do with what they did from a personnel perspective by really retooling that receiver room to be much more dynamic, filled with playmakers, filled with guys that have different skill sets that complement each other very well, whether it be the offensive line, another year of kind of learning the pin and pull system that Kalen DeBoer kind of likes to implement. Another year in the weight room of guys who were probably a little bit not overweight from the point of view that they were out of shape, but just kind of maybe a little more lean to be able to kind of get out on the perimeter and screen blocking downfield, which is, I think, what more of the offense, what Kalen DeBoer wants to run, whether it be the running backs who I think are going to benefit a big deal this year, not from just another year in the system, but I believe really that the main issue with Alabama running the ball the past 2 years, offensive line has to do a better job. There's no doubt about it. But I really think that defenses did not respect Alabama's ability to make them pay for stacking the box, to make them pay for leaving only one safety back in the back end of the defense, bringing another up to account for that run, because Jalen Milroe did not make defenses pay, because especially when defenses blitz, and you kind of saw it in a preseason game yesterday, he just doesn't thrive in that type of situation. He's not processing and seeing it quick enough. But now that he has been named the starter, Ty Simpson, I think, a son of a coach, a fourth-year player, and I repeat, I said fourth-year player, not fifth-year player, Ty Simpson. I think he is going to be able to fully operate this offense in the way that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb have envisioned. I think you're going to see a return of the RPO game. Really, it's just been RO, run only, because there hadn't been much passing off of that RPO where Tua and Bryce made a killing off of in their careers at Alabama. Jalen Milroe rarely ran those, and I think it was because he was not very effective at running them. You're going to still be able to keep some of the read option and quarterback run game implemented into the playbook because Ty Simpson is very athletic, and I think he's a very good runner. And I think one thing that really stands out to me that Kalen DeBoer said was that Ty Simpson in particular, this was on day 3 of camp, he had done a great job of taking the gimmies. And what he means by that is we have trust that when we call a play, like we call a shot play, he isn't going to force the ball if it's not there. He's going to go through his progressions. All right, if the deep guy's not there, I'm going to come down to my second. If he's not there, I'm going to check it down. And that way, you keep the chains moving and you're not wasting downs, which was too common occurrence in the past 2 years. So you got him at the helm, and I think he's going to do a really good job. I think the coaches are really confident in him. You've got an offensive line that's improved, like I said, with Caden Proctor, Parker Brailsford, Wilkin Formby kind of all returning, who played a good bit last year. You got Cam Dewberry and probably Geno Vandemark at right guard because Jaden Roberts has been concussed and been in concussion protocol. But the receiving room is where it's really exciting. Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard were the top 2 last year. They're back. And Isaiah Horton is transferred in from Miami. Different body type guy. I think adds another skill set to that room. And I've heard really good things about Rico Scott all camp long. If I had to have one concern on the offense, it would be the tight end room. I think it's a solid room. I don't think there's any superstar potential in that room. But I don't think in this offense you have to have that to thrive and to be effective and efficient. So I say all that to say, Graham, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I think you're going to see a radically different approach on offense from last year to this year, mainly due to a different skill set at quarterback. And I believe Ryan Grubb's experience as a play caller is going to really benefit Alabama in this upcoming year. But what do you make of all that, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot to process right there. I want to go back to last year just for a second. I know you said you didn't want to talk about it much, but Alabama plays Michigan in the bowl game, and I'm glad that I was not forced to watch that. That day we were
it was humorous.
We were actually on the ski slopes enjoying some time in the snow, and I think it was kind of the culmination of the way that the season ended that way. It was kind of a culmination as to how good of a skier I was that, you always go downhill, but eventually you either stop or you hit something. And I think for Alabama, that was it. We'd gone downhill the whole season. We finally were able to stop. We finally just had to be done. And man, really just kind of a sour way to end what last year could have been. I feel like we played Michigan, and I feel like there was a lot of hope that Alabama not necessarily would get right, but would prove that maybe some of the people were wrong. Maybe it was a disappointing year, but we were good enough to be in the playoff, win more games than we should have. But it was just more evidence that we were exactly what we played all year. Mm-hmm. But that gives me hope for this year, knowing that at least we weren't, in a sense, underrated, underappreciated, undervalued last year. If anything, it was probably the opposite. We might have been overrated. We might have been overappreciated. And I think that this year is, in a sense, the sour taste in the guys' mouths, the fans' mouths, the coaches' mouth, that we can't let that happen again. We can't. It just means too much to let that happen again. And, in the way that the college football landscape is, today, 2 bad years in a row almost, in a sense, can ruin your program because that sets you back the next 3 years, which it takes to retool, replenish, get new guys in, even possibly a new coaching staff. Not calling for it, just saying. But I do think there's a heightened sense of urgency for Alabama and for this coaching staff to not only get right, but show that they've made significant progress in having a full offseason with their players in their system, having a full transfer portal, a full freshman class to get the guys in there that need to fit in. I'm not going to hit on every position like you did because I think you did a good job covering it. I want to say that the one thing that I would, in a sense, be confident in Alabama for this year is not anybody that's new. It's not anybody that transferred in a sense. It's not one particular person, not one particular position, but one particular room. And to me, I think what gives me, in a sense, the most confidence is this offensive line. And that's probably a little bit of a, not saying a hot take, but a kind of maybe raise your eyebrows
It
a
is
little
for
bit.
many. Mm-hmm.
It is for many. I think that when you look at it, you have, in a sense, 3 guys returning, but if Jaden Roberts is hurt, that's only going to be really 2. But I guess 2.5 you could consider for
Okay.
Formby and Vanderbilt playing some last year. But Caden Proctor, left tackle, Parker Brailsford at center. A lot of experience there and a lot of, in a sense, not only time to learn and time to grow, but it's time to prove that this offense is what it can be, in a sense. I think that for Caden Proctor, one of the highest rated recruits, in a sense, in Alabama history, big time get, come down from Iowa. And in a sense, we've seen those good moments, but we've seen a lot of the bad moments too. I think this is a year where if Ty is going to be good, if Ty is going to be the best player that Alabama needs in the quarterback room, Caden Proctor has to be at an elite level. He has to be a 5-star prospect that is, in a sense, a wall that you can't get past. I think that for him, he's gotten some help this offseason. Cam Dewberry coming from A&M, left guard, right tackle last year were, in a sense, all like just a carousel, just in and out, in and out, in and out. Who's playing good right now? And it never seemed to be really anybody good. Last year, Parker Brailsford and Caden Proctor kind of seemed to be the ones that were, in a sense, consistent, which was scary.
And Booker was pretty consistent too.
Fairly.
Yeah,
but
fairly.
I think that, yeah. But as you look at it, I think the offensive line is where this team has to start. It has to start there because last year, in a sense, they were given it, in a sense, a disadvantage because Alabama could not throw the ball successfully. So they had to be even better than even better running the ball because that was our only chance. Because our short passing game, medium passing game, wasn't there. So there wasn't, in a sense, a huge, a lot of pressure on them to block, because even if they did, incomplete. I think that for me, you can look at all the guys we got in, but the offensive line has to be the cornerstone of this team, of this offense. And if it's going to take the next level, if you're going to not only be excited that Ryan Grubb is here, but remain excited that Ryan Grubb is going to be, I guess, back as the offensive coordinator, you could say, at Alabama. It has to start with the offensive line because if it doesn't start there, what Ty Simpson has, running back, whoever's going to be since Jam's hurt, one of the better wide receiver rooms that we've had in previous years, what are we going to do with it? I think the offensive line has to start there. Ultimately, in a sense, it's ride or die for them. It's ride or die for those guys. Because Ty Simpson is definitely a better thrower than Milroe was, but not the athlete that Milroe was in the ability to extend plays, get out of the pocket, and make something out of nothing, you could say. But I'm optimistic. I know that you said, at least, well, you quoted, that this is going to be a Ryan Grubb offense. It's going to be no holds bar, everything on the table, every single week, which I think is going to be at least a little more exciting for Alabama football. But Alabama football, the fans, coaches, administration, players aren't at the level they were last year. That's not where we are. we're better than that. And I think that the consistency and the floor have to be even higher this year. But got a tough schedule ahead, and got a lot to prove going forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Graham. And I want to touch on two things that you said that I think were fantastic points. You said it starts up front on the offensive line. That is where the cornerstone of this offense will be. And for Ty Simpson to be successful, that unit needs to be good. And Caden Proctor is a highly touted recruit. And I think, and I know who I'm talking to, and they know who they are, that he gets a little too much hate from some of the fan base. The guy played really well last year. He was a much better player last year than he was in 2023, and he hurt his shoulder in the warm-ups leading up to game one, and kind of played with that all year, then had to have surgery in the offseason. So he did that good of a job with a bum shoulder all year. But this year's the year where you got to be elite. You've got to, this is your money year. This is where you live up to that billing of what you were promised to be out of high school. And along with him and Brailsford in particular, to me, those are the two nastiest guys that Alabama has. They're not only the most talented, I think they're the two nastiest alongside Roberts. But again, I don't really know his status because he hadn't practiced in 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. But they've got to set the tone up front, and there has to be a running game to help complement what Alabama wants to do offensively in the passing game and to help relieve some pressure off of Ty. But again, it goes back to that point that I made about I think that the running game overall is going to be improved because I do think defenses are going to have to play Ty Simpson differently than they play Jalen Milroe because Jalen Milroe did not earn the respect of defenses with the ability to beat them with his arm on a consistent basis. That does not mean that he never did it. I don't want to get misconstrued, but it wasn't consistent. And the big difference between 2023 and last year was last year, Alabama's offense was in third and long a lot, like they were in third and long a lot in 2023. The difference is Jalen Milroe's deep ball was much, much better in 2023. Kind of fell off a cliff a little bit in 2024. So if that was your ace in the hole, and then all of a sudden you don't have anything up your sleeve, you're going to have issues offensively. And you saw that time and time again for the Alabama offense. And I think with a guy like Ty, there's going to be, I think you're still going to have the same level of explosiveness in a different type way. But I think efficiency and consistency is going to be hopefully what separates him from Jalen Milroe for the past 2 years. And I want to say that if you want to see a glimpse of to what this offense could be running at peak power, go back and watch Washington in 2023 and 2022. I am not comparing Ty Simpson to Michael Penix. Michael Penix is a top 10 pick. I'm just saying the receiving core, it's there. I think Ty is going to be able to deliver the ball to them effectively and let them do their thing. I think the concepts, the aggressiveness, the style of offense is going to be very similar to that. And for one, can't wait to watch that unfold because last year that was non-existent. The other point that I'm going to make brief mention of, and then we're going to transition to the defense. You mentioned the thing about last year, the standard was not upheld, which I would 100% agree with you. I don't know any Alabama fan who would disagree. I think what gives me hope for this year is that David Ballou, who's the strength and conditioning coach at Alabama, he's been interviewed multiple times. And he said after that Michigan game, they had a meeting. The whole team did, and they all agreed that last year was not good enough. And that if you don't want to be here, get out. Alabama was the only SEC team to have no players enter the transfer portal in the spring portal window. I think that speaks volumes to the unity on this team, to the cohesion, to the commitment and determination to get this program back to where it was, because it has slipped. It even was slipping a little bit under Saban, which we've talked about. not to the level that some people thought it was slipping, but it had slipped. But last year was definitely much, way below the bar. And again, I think Kalen DeBoer, there were some things that he could have done better. There's no doubt about it. But I also think people do not realize the situation that he walked into as far as the talent that left, as far as how he had to handle the team to make sure the rest of the team didn't leave. And from all accounts, this offseason, you ask any player, they said this is the hardest offseason, even if they've been there 4 or 5 years. This is the hardest one I've had to go through. They put them through as much as they could to toughen them up, to hold them accountable, and to get them back to the standard that is at Alabama, and that's competing and winning national championships. So I thought that was a great point on you that you made, and I just wanted to expound on that a little further because I do feel like, no one at this time of year is going to tell you, man, our culture sucks or we've had a terrible offseason. But I think the vibes out of Tuscaloosa right now are really, really good. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, Graham. So, Graham, this unit has a lot of talent returning. And I would argue last year, back half of the year, there weren't many defenses in college football that were playing better than this one. What are you looking for on this side of the ball? What are your expectations for this unit going into 2025?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that the end of last year, well, and just in general, last year's defense was one of the best that Alabama's had in nearly a decade. Got very high ranks. And when you look at the circumstances that they lined up with, like we said, some inconsistencies on offense, this defense outperformed what much other situations could have ever expected. Hampton, you mentioned the portal. You mentioned the offseason. You mentioned the new coaching staff. This is the first year that we get a full offseason with this new system where we can actually determine who stays, who goes, who's the best fit for this Kane Womack 4-2-5 defense. And like we said, I thought we saw a lot of progress that was made towards the end of the season, at least understanding assignment football, which at points we'd struggled with. But I think the name of this game is not any one person, but is experience. We're returning a lot of talent on defense that has had more time to prepare, more time to learn, and just be a better fit for this 4-2-5 scheme, which going into last season, we were playing certain people in not necessarily bad positions, but had people that were having to transition to another position based off of scheme fit where they had not practiced or played for several years. So I think that experience is the name of the game for this. I think that you can look at the long list of Alabama defenders on the depth chart, and you're going to recognize a lot of names, which for a lot of Alabama fans, that's not very common. We're used to seeing, by the time we know somebody, they're ended up drafted, or they end up last year possibly in the portal if they were a young guy. Caleb Downs would just be an example, But you look at this defense and you see and you recognize a lot of names and a lot of dynamic playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. I think that I'm optimistic that the defense is going to take even a better step this year, playing in scheme together, and ultimately, hopefully having an offense that can actually end up putting them in some better situations going forward. I'm excited for
playing complementary football.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying, Graham?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm trying to say that we need a team that can play two ways, offense and defense. Not both ways, two ways.
What a concept that is, because that was rarely played last year by Alabama, and really even in 2023 to an extent. So that's a great point by you. Any more notes on the defense on your end?
Not especially. Excited for the DBs this year. I think that we've seen a lot of returns up front, but I think we got glimpses of the DB room last year. But I think that's the room that to me, is going to, in a sense, take that next step. Have a lot of experience, have a lot of young guys that um, could actually come on the scene and kind of make their names known. But I think DB room. Obviously, we're gonna have more of those than we are anywhere else. We got 5 DBs on the field at any time. I think that's got to be the room that steps up, and I'm optimistic that they will.
Very nice, very nice. Before I give my thoughts, I got one more question for you. Give me one guy on defense that you are expecting either to come on the scene in their first year of playing or take a big leap from last year to this year.
Yeah, I think that one guy new on the scene, I think it has to be Bray Hubbard. And it's not because he's brand new, but did not have a full year of it being his position. He came in last year after some injury. I'm excited for Bray Hubbard in the sense that he's the guy. And we saw glimpses of good last year, but there was also a fair share of, oh no, what are we doing? And I think that some of that will be relieved this year. I think that's, in a sense, the new guy on the team. You can name all the 5-star big time talent. Dijon Lee, Chuck McDonald, guys like that that are that can come on the scene and have their name known early. But I think a guy that really has to step up this year is Deontay Lawson. I think a guy that is going to be the leader and the voice of the defense. I think it has to be him. Last year, what was his name? Campbell, linebacker. What's his name? Hampton.
Jahad Campbell. You had it?
Yeah, Jahad Campbell. Yeah. Again, a guy that not necessarily playing out of system or out of scheme, but a guy that had to kind of transition and move to a position to best help the team. And he had a good fundamental year, in a sense, was kind of the leader on that team. I expect Deontay Lawson to kind of step into that position of, we've seen him have good moments. He's the graduate student that's been there forever and all the time. I think he's going to be the guy that, in a sense, the name that people remember of. That's the leader of the defense. That's the guy that's got to make the big play at the big moment. And I think that'll happen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that Deontay Lawson point. He was voted a captain again for the second year in a row by his teammates, which is a pretty distinguished honor. He's the only guy, which all the other guys left, that were captains last year, but himself, Tim Keenan, another defensive guy on that D-line, fifth-year guy, Ty Simpson, and Parker Brailsford were all voted captains by their teammates on Monday. And I think Deontay Lawson coming back was monumental for this defense because I really do think linebacker depth, it would have been a little suspect for Alabama if Deontay Lawson had not come back to the capstone. But you have him at linebacker. You have Justin Jefferson coming back for another year, who there were many times last year he played over Jahad Campbell. Or they would have 3 linebackers on the field at the same time because Justin Jefferson has really good instincts. He's got really good speed, plays with a ton of physicality. I think he's just a really good ball player. I think him and Deontay Lawson as a duo are going to be really good. They got Nakai Hill-Green back, or not back, but got him from Colorado, who he's a really good run stopper, really savvy, experienced football player that I think is going to play a lot of meaningful snaps for Alabama this year. So I feel great about the linebacker core. D-line I feel good about. I don't know if I would feel great about it because I think Tim Keenan, I think, is a really, really good college football player. There's no right at this moment, there is not a star on that defense line. But if I had to give a candidate for somebody who I think by the end of this year we're going to be saying that about, it's James Smith. I think James Smith is going to really emerge on the scene this year because you saw it in glimpses last year. It wasn't consistent enough. And I think part of that was learning a new scheme, learning a new system. But he has all the tools. He plays with a great motor. And you can't teach his size and athleticism combined. As Hugh Freeze would like to say, he has a lot of length and girth. So I think that James Smith is going to be a really good player along that front this year. The other thing that I'm kind of monitoring a little bit for Alabama is the edge group, getting, pass rush, getting home. I think last year, LT Overton was one of the best in the country at pressure rate. He has to do a better job of converting those pressures into sacks this year if he wants to join that elite category. But I think he's got it in him. I think I think Quay Russaw is primed at that Wolf position for a massive year. I think last year you saw glimpses, and I think really in that injury that he suffered, I believe it was versus Wisconsin, I think that really affected him. He wasn't quite as twitchy, didn't have the same burst that he had earlier in the year. He slimmed down and lean, gotten a little more leaner, gotten a little leaner this offseason. I think he's going to play really, really well this year. And then you got guys like Yanze Pierre from Eufaula, who I think is going to play a role this year. Keon Keeley, got to be a little bit more consistent according to Kane Womack, but there's a lot of potential there. So they got guys at those edge positions, and they got different kinds of guys who offer different skill sets, kind of like I was saying about the receiver room, that I think is going to be able to allow Alabama to play multiple different looks and be a little bit more multiple and varied in their play calls overall, because I think this was a common criticism last year, especially against Vanderbilt. Alabama played a lot of one high, a lot of cover one robber, it kind of looked like, with one safety back. And I feel like they were a little predictable at times last year in the bowl game against Michigan. I give credit to his name, called the film guy, Brooks Austin, on Twitter and on YouTube. He did a breakdown of the Michigan game, and Alabama did a lot of double mugging. I mean, he looked like Kyle Edwards in NCAA 26, baby, just double mugging the heck out of his defense. And when you do that, you can become predictable, and the offense has a little bit more of a beat on what you're trying to do. But I think a lot of that was out of necessity because a lot of the players, this was a completely new system from what Nick Saban ran. And I think there was a lot of learning, not only from the players learning the scheme, but Kane Womack learning his personnel too and kind of what he could do. And so I think they were limited on that front, and they were also limited by the youth on the back end, which you mentioned, Graham. You mentioned the secondary. And I think as a unit, them and the receiving core had the most dramatic, they're going to have the most dramatic improvement from last year to this year. That secondary, I believe, is going to be top 3 to top 5 in the country. I think they are that talented. I think last year, Xavier Brown, early in the year, obviously showed flashes, but he was a true freshman. He made some mistakes, got picked on. Red Morgan played a good bit as a true freshman. He got picked on. There were some issues a little bit in the back end due to just simple, inexperience and lack of depth. I mean, if you remember the Tennessee game, Graham, 5 DBs got hurt. That's when Keon Sabb got hurt. Xavier Brown got hurt. Malachi Moore, I think, got dinged up. There were 2 or 3 other people in there, and they were playing with all backups in that second half. And I think that's in large part to why Tennessee had a little more success on the ground was due to those injuries. But this year, you got Bray Hubbard, who you mentioned, who I think is going to be an all SEC type guy. I think he's got fantastic instincts, not only in pass coverage, but I mean, that dude comes down like a kamikaze to tackle and get his head in there on a running play. Love the way that he plays. I think Keon Sabb is primed for a big year. I think Zay Mincy is going to play a ton. I think they're really high on him. Dominique and Xavier are back there on the boundary. And Graham, I don't know if you've heard the reports about a freshman that they got who came in and he made waves in the spring, but it hadn't stopped in fall camp, man. Dijon Lee, a.k.a. Mustard, number 5. He's 6'4", 200 pounds at corner from California. Kid's going to play this year. And they were apparently tinkering with a formation in practice where they had 3 DBs on the field with Dijon and Dominique out at boundary. They had Xavier playing that Husky position, basically, playing in the slot. Then they had Bray Hubbard walked up as kind of like an off-ball linebacker. and Zay Mincy and Keon Sabb back deep. That alone shows the difference in depth from last year to this year. And that's not even mentioning a guy like Ivan Taylor, who's apparently really impressed. A guy like Cam Calhoun, who transferred in from Utah, who has done really, really well. Deshaun Jones. This secondary not only has elite front-end talent, the second string would probably start at half of the SEC. That is a credit to the staff and a credit to Mo Linguist for how he has developed that room. And I think because of that, you paired that with an improved pass rush, and I don't think teams are going to be able to run the ball very effectively on Alabama this year. I expect this unit to be a top 10 unit in the country. You combine, again, the talent and then another year in the system and another year of being able to change up your looks, to change up kind of what you're doing defensively, being a little bit more multiple. The Dark Knight of defense, a.k.a. Kane Womack, he's going to be in his bag this year. I'm excited to watch this unit get started on or in Tallahassee this Saturday against Florida State. But Graham, we've covered the offense, we've covered the defense. To kind of put a bow on it, to pay homage to our good friend Chase, give me your expectations for this team. What do you expect for Alabama in 2025?
Yeah, you mentioned that this might be the possibility of Alabama having a top 10 defense this year. I've been reading reports and based off some expert predictions that I've seen, I've heard, read, seen that Alabama will have a top 5 scoring defense this year. I think that's a bold take. We've got lots of tough teams on the schedule, but I think I'm buying into it. I think this is going to be one of the best defenses in the country, if not the best. And I think when we look at it, all said and done, it's going to be the leading defense in the SEC when it comes to points per game.
Wow. I like that prediction, and I kind of agree with you because last year that was the least amount of points that an Alabama defense had given up since 2017. And then, that is so impressive considering the amount of obstacles that unit had to overcome from injuries to inexperience. So I think that is a great call by you. I'll give my brief expectations for Alabama this year. I think this team is very similar to Ohio State last year. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying, I think the talent is very comparable, to be quite honest with you. And I think, like going into last year, Ohio State kept a lot of guys who could have gone to the NFL draft and been drafted mid-round. They got those guys to come back. Alabama did the same thing this offseason. And I think they're going to be the benefactors of that. I think with a quarterback like Ty Simpson, who is going to be able to operate this offense at the level that it was intended to and the way that it was intended to, combined with a defense and offensive line that I think are going to be improved, I really truly believe, and I did not say this last year. You can go back to our preview show. I did not have Alabama winning a national championship or even really competing to win the national championship last year, mainly because I was worried about the quarterback position, and those worries were proven correct. I think Alabama can win the national championship. And I'm not saying that. Of course, everyone knows I'm an Alabama fan. I try to be very objective and non-biased on this show. I think the ingredients are there to win it all. I trust this coaching staff. I know I got hammered for it last year, but I still think this is the best coaching staff overall in totality that Alabama has had since 2017. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think they're going to prove it this year. I know the schedule's tough, but I believe in Kalen DeBoer. I believe in the addition of Ryan Grubb. I know Kane Womack is going to add more tools to his toolkit on the defensive side of the ball. And I really expect, barring injury to the quarterback or anybody major, I think Alabama can win and will win the national championship in 2025. We appreciate you guys so much for listening, for subscribing, which again, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell. That way you know whenever we put out a video. We usually release one video a week on Mondays around noon. That's kind of our schedule, and we do a recap of the previous weekend of college football, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Again, we miss our friend Chase, but we know that he will be back on here at some point during the year. And I did want to say, I didn't even tell Graham about this, but I kind of had this on my heart to kind of say all off season, and want to put it at the end of the show. We talk about college football on this show all the time, and I know, Chase is a pastor, and we've talked about our faith, some on here. But I really wanted to encourage anyone, if you made it this far in the video and, you kind of have questions about that, and you want to know more, about Jesus and how much he loves you and how he died for you, to set you free. If you want to know more about that and have a conversation, feel free to reach out to us in the comments, DM us. We'll be happy to talk with you about that because, we try to give you the best college football takes that we can. But if we're not pointing you toward Christ and how we talk with each other, and if we're not pointing you toward him in general, then we're not doing it right. So I just felt like I need to mention that. So again, if you have any questions and want to talk about that further, feel free to hit us up in the comments or in our DMs. And with that, Graham, that is a wrap on our preview show for the 2025 college football season. And we will be back next week. But until then, chew on that.